On my 27th birthday, my billionaire grandfather smiled and asked, "So how's the apartment?" "Comfortable," I replied, stunned. "What apartment?" My parents fell silent. He looked at them slowly and asked, "Then where did the money go?" That night was supposed to be a simple birthday. Another year, another milestone. Instead, one question tore open my world and revealed a betrayal that had cost me millions and altered the story of my past. Before that evening, I was just Caitlin, a graphic designer in downtown Chicago, trying to get by. I shared a slightly run-down two-bedroom with my roommate Olivia. Rent was brutal, even split between us, but it was city life, mismatched furniture, art on the walls, and a place that felt like mine. Despite having a billionaire grandfather, I insisted on being independent. My parents, Harold and Diane, lived comfortably in the suburbs, five-bedroom house, pool, regular vacations. My dad had a senior role at an insurance company, and my mom worked in real estate. They never offered financial help, always stressing the importance of earning your own way. When I graduated from art school 4 years earlier with nearly $70,000 in student loans, they gave me pep talks and a copy of Dave Ramsey. I watched classmates get help with down payments. I got lectures about character. I didn't resent them then. I was determined to make it, though there were moments I wondered why they refused to help while showing off new cars and renovations. Grandpa Walter was a mystery. Built a real estate empire from nothing, rarely attended family events, and could be intimidating. Still, he had a soft spot for me. When we spoke, he asked about my design work and listened. My cousin Natalie, by contrast, lived off the family trust, always posting exotic trips and luxury shopping, making the difference in our circumstances obvious. The week before my birthday had been rough. My agency lost a major client, and I was one of 5 laid off. I had maybe 2 months' rent in savings. When my parents insisted on a fancy birthday dinner, I tried to decline, suggested a quiet takeout at home, but they were adamant 27 is special. Looking back, their insistence feels calculated. There had been small oddities I dismissed. My dad shutting down talk of a master's degree because of more student debt. My mom changing the subject when I mentioned money. Hushed calls that stopped when I entered the room, and a tense silence when Grandpa Walter was mentioned. A few months earlier, I'd seen my mom browsing properties in Panama. When I asked, she snapped the laptop shut. My dad made comments about traveling more in the future. The morning of my birthday, Olivia gave me a handmade card and a potted plant she knew I wanted. She'd known how hard I'd been working. As I dressed for dinner, she helped pick an outfit from my small wardrobe. I had no idea that in a few hours my family would be exposed, and that my financial struggles had been unnecessary. The restaurant had no prices on the menu. Crystal chandeliers, white linens. I felt out of place in my simple black dress. My mother wore a designer outfit and expensive jewelry. My father was in a tailored suit. Conversation felt forced. Surface-level questions about my job search quickly turned into safe topics. They presented gifts, a designer wallet and scarf, and then launched into a familiar lecture about responsibility and credit. Halfway through my entree, the atmosphere shifted. People nearby straightened, staff became more attentive. Grandpa Walter had arrived with his assistant, Jennifer. At 82, he still carried himself with authority. In a tailored suit, my parents looked nervous. He approached and kissed my cheek. "Happy birthday, Caitlin," he said. He sat and, after a polite exchange, mentioned my investment portfolio and the trust that should have transferred to my control 2 years earlier when I turned 25. I was confused. "I don't have a trust fund," I said. He looked at me, then at my parents. "Of course you do. Yours was the largest, $5 million initially, plus growth, managed by your parents until your 20th birthday, with control transferring at 25. He asked about an apartment he'd purchased in the Gold Coast 2 years earlier. A 2-bedroom corner unit, and whether it was comfortable. I whispered, "What apartment?" The silence was crushing. My parents turned pale. Grandpa Walter's voice dropped. "Then where did the money go?" My father stammered. "Walter, this is a misunderstanding. We can explain." Walter didn't sound convinced. He called for Stanley, his longtime attorney, who was nearby. Jennifer had already contacted security and asked for financial records to be pulled. We moved to a private dining room. A short while later, Stanley arrived with documents. He explained, "When I was born, Walter had set up a trust with an initial $5 million. The trust was to be managed by my parents until I turned 25. It could be used earlier for education, health, or general welfare, with proper documentation." According to statements from 3 months earlier, the trust had grown to about $8.3 million. That number stunned me. While I'd been struggling to pay rent and working long hours, millions had existed in my name. Stanley produced more records. There were unauthorized withdrawals, starting about 7 years earlier, transfers to Harold and Diane's personal accounts. After reviewing, he said roughly $8 million had been diverted. Only about $300,000 remained. The room went quiet. Walter asked where the money had gone. My parents admitted mortgages, cars, renovations, investments in my mother's business, vacations, a house in Florida. The flashbacks hit me in a new light. My parents declining to help with deposits, telling me loans build character. My mother showing off a Mercedes while I rode the bus. "You let me struggle," I said. "You had my money the whole time." My mother cried and said they intended to pay it back, that things got out of hand. My father insisted they were looking out for me. Stanley's review suggested otherwise. Large, unauthorized transfers. It looked like theft. Walter told Jennifer to contact the Financial Crimes Unit. My father pleaded this was a family matter. Walter said theft at that scale is criminal. He told me it was my decision whether to press charges. He also ordered the family's assets frozen in a forensic accounting. He instructed Stanley to change the apartment locks immediately, with keys to be given only to me. My father made one last appeal, asking where they would go. Walter replied coldly that they had a 5-bedroom house purchased with stolen money, and that the real estate fraud unit would be interested in how properties bought with trust money were titled. The restaurant manager brought the check. The tension was thick and final. I looked at my parents, who could not meet my eyes, and at my grandfather steady beside me. Jennifer and Stanley remained professional. Nothing about my life would be the same after that night. The foundation I'd believed in had been shown to be false, and I didn't know what remained when the dust settled. The car ride home was quiet and heavy. I declined Walter's offer to stay at one of his properties. I needed the small comfort of my own apartment, shabby as it was. As the taxi pulled away, I watched my parents on the sidewalk, frozen and suddenly diminished under the streetlight. When I opened my apartment door, Olivia saw my face and knew something was wrong. She led me to the couch, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and waited while I tried to find words. "My parents stole $8 million from me," I finally said, and even as the words left my mouth, they sounded unreal. I told her everything, in fragments, the trust fund I didn't know existed, the Gold Coast apartment that should have been mine, the years I'd struggled unnecessarily. Shock gave way to an anger I'd never felt before. "I applied for food stamps last year," I said, voice breaking. "I ate ramen most nights so I could pay rent, and they used my trust to remodel their kitchen and buy luxury cars." Olivia gripped my hand as I cycled through disbelief, fury, and grief. She made tea that went cold on the table, while my phone buzzed with calls and texts from my parents, all ignored. The only message I answered was from Walter checking I was safe. The next morning, Jennifer called with updates. Walter's legal team moved quickly. They confirmed the Florida house, my parents' primary residence, and their cars had been purchased with trust money. A forensic accountant was tracing every withdrawal. Jennifer said roughly $300,000 remained of the original trust. Most funds had gone to property purchases, luxury goods, and risky investments that had failed. The following days blurred. I put the job search on hold and focused on the crisis. Walter sent a car each day to bring me to meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and a therapist who specialized in family trauma. A week after my birthday, we learned my parents had bought plane tickets to Panama 3 days before the dinner. They'd planned to leave the country right after the celebration, apparently fearing Walter might learn the truth. They only delayed departure to keep up appearances, while they expected Walter might attend. Family divisions followed predictably. My dad's siblings defended him, framing this as bad money management. My mom's side was split. One aunt called to apologize. The most unexpected support came from my cousin Natalie. She arrived at my apartment one afternoon, subdued and apologetic. I always wondered why Uncle Harold and Aunt Diane lived so well when our trusts were similar, she said. It turned out Natalie's trust had been smaller, but properly managed. She'd stretched it carefully and presented a more lavish lifestyle than reality. That conversation began an unexpected friendship, a bright spot amid the turmoil. Legally, things progressed without pause. Forensic accounting showed about $300,000 remained. The rest had been spent or lost. The Florida house and our family home were seized because they were bought with trust funds. Cars, a seldom used boat, and a large jewelry collection were cataloged for potential recovery. Meanwhile, my parents' messages shifted from explanations to pleading as the consequences tightened. My father called from a hotel saying they had nowhere to go. My mother sent long emails insisting everything had been for my benefit without explaining how their luxury lifestyle helped me. The story reached the press. A business outlet ran a small piece about a family financial dispute involving Walter Harrington. It hinted at misappropriation but didn't name me. I deleted my social accounts, unable to face acquaintances who might piece things together. Guilt nagged at me, despite being the victim. Had I driven my parents to this? Should I have noticed earlier? Was I wrong to let Walter's team pursue them? The therapist explained such guilt is common after family betrayal, but knowing didn't make it easier. A month in, Walter invited me to his penthouse. The space was warm despite its luxury. He made drinks and dismissed staff so we could talk privately. "This isn't your fault," he said. "Your parents made choices. They betrayed you and the trust placed in them. I wish I had seen it sooner." I admitted there had been signs. "You had no reason to suspect your parents," he replied. He showed me old family photographs. My grandmother, whom I barely remembered, Walter as a young developer, my mother as a child on his shoulders. He reflected on the family's complexities and admitted he might have been too focused on business to influence how my mother related to money. His rare vulnerability helped me see the betrayal had layers beyond my own hurt. They had also betrayed the man who intended to protect my future. A month after my birthday, legal mediation took place at Walter's attorney's downtown office. My parents looked visibly aged and nervous. The forensic team presented charts that traced a systematic draining of my trust over 7 years. What began as small borrowings had become large withdrawals, funding a house, cars, vacations, a failed luxury real estate venture, and my father's ill-fated attempts at day trading. When the evidence finished, Walter addressed my parents. The accounting was complete, and the question remained whether this would be treated as a civil or criminal matter. My parents' lawyer said they would cooperate. "Amends?" I asked. "You stole my future. How do you make amends?" My mother blamed a spiral of borrowing and maintaining appearances. My father admitted a problem with spending and status. They said they intended to pay it back. When I asked about the Gold Coast apartment my grandfather had bought for me 2 years earlier, they admitted they had rented it out and funneled the income into their account. That betrayal landed anew while I shared a cramped flat. They collected rent on a property meant for me. Walter laid out 2 options: sign over remaining assets, bought with trust funds, cooperate with recovery, and accept a repayment plan in exchange for avoiding criminal charges, or continue to hide and face criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and theft. My parents quickly chose the first. Walter left the decision to me. I studied them, the people who'd raised me and simultaneously taken my inheritance. I didn't want them jailed, but I wanted every recoverable dollar returned and a full acknowledgement of what they'd done. Over several hours, my parents signed documents, transferring assets and agreeing to the recovery plan. By day's end, I legally owned the Florida house, which would be sold, and arrangements were made to liquidate possessions. When attorneys left to copy papers, I asked my parents simply, why? My mother reached for my hand. I didn't pull away this time. She said they got caught up in a lifestyle they couldn't afford and used my trust as an easy fix. My father admitted bad investments and a problem with spending. They acknowledged the need for professional help. It wasn't a full answer, but it was a starting point, a small crack in the wall of betrayal. 2 weeks later, I moved into a modest one-bedroom, purchased from recovered funds. It wasn't the Gold Coast unit, but it was mine, mortgage-free. Walter helped pick it and insisted on security and a convenient location. He also guided me through financial basics. The recovered assets and liquidations totaled just over $1 million. A fraction of the original trust, but still life-changing for someone who'd lived paycheck to paycheck. A job lead came through Walter's connections, a role at a reputable design firm with better pay and growth potential. Initially, I felt uneasy accepting help that felt nepotistic, but Walter reminded me that he only arranged the interview. Earning the job would be my accomplishment. Over the months, I set new routines and boundaries. I allowed limited contact with my parents, brief calls but no visits. They had moved into a small rental and begun therapy for financial addiction, a diagnosis I'd been unfamiliar with but which seemed to fit. Their social life had crumbled. Friends and country club circles fell away. Slowly, relationships shifted. I met my parents for coffee once in neutral territory. They described steps toward recovery, separate accounts, strict budgets, and accountability partners. My mother asked if we could try monthly lunches. I didn't agree but didn't shut the door completely. Walter had a minor health scare that fall, which softened him further. He told me his grandmother believed family was worth fighting for, not at the cost of self-respect or safety, but worth understanding and, when possible, forgiveness. His steadiness helped me rebuild. With Walter's encouragement, I started a small graphic design consulting side business, working with startups. The work was challenging and rewarding and felt wholly mine, independent of family or recovered funds. Jennifer, surprisingly, became a mentor and friend. She'd worked with Walter for years and offered practical career advice. A college friend, Thomas, reappeared in my life unexpectedly and became an anchor. He had no ties to the family drama and treated me simply as Caitlin. By 6 months after the revelation, things had begun to stabilize. My new role evolved into leading a small team on a major national rebrand. Walter helped set up a proper financial foundation, about $1.2 million invested carefully, with funds set aside for immediate security, retirement, health insurance that actually covered more than catastrophic care, and an emergency fund to cover a year of expenses. The security felt disorienting at first. Habits of scarcity lingered. My parents continued to rebuild a pared-down life and careers. My father took a lower-level insurance job. My mother left real estate and worked administrative roles. Social consequences remained significant. Old friends and status symbols were gone. Over time, I rebuilt a life based on truth rather than concealment. Boundaries and new routines brought stability. I set financial controls and learned to trust myself again. The recovery was partial and complicated. I still carried scars from the betrayal, but I also found new independence, supportive relationships, and a career path that felt authentic. The future felt possible again, shaped by the work I did and the choices I made going forward. My confidence was growing, not only at work but in my personal life. What began as crisis-focused therapy had become a tool for spotting unhealthy patterns and building better relationships. I was relearning to trust my judgment, and to see that I'd been harmed by other people's choices, not by my own failures. 6 months after that birthday, Walter arranged a surprise dinner. He booked a private room at a restaurant even more exclusive than the one where everything fell apart. But the mood that night was completely different. When I arrived, Walter raised a glass. "6 months ago, your life changed in ways no one could have predicted," he said. "Tonight, we celebrate what you've built from the ashes." After dinner, he handed me a small box. Inside was a key and the deed to a modest apartment in a secure building, close to my office. He explained the Gold Coast unit had been sold as part of recovery efforts, and this place was bought with recovered funds, chosen for the life I was living now. It wasn't the value that moved me, but the clean break it symbolized, a new start, not tied to what had been stolen. My relationship with Natalie shifted from cautious to genuine. We discovered common interests and compatible personalities. She invested modestly in my side business, and Walter helped structure the deal so it was fair. Over lunch, she admitted she had envied parts of my life that weren't real. Her trust had been smaller but managed properly, and her carefully maintained image on social media masked a more modest reality. That conversation grew into an unexpected friendship and real support. Thomas also became more present. Our coffee catch-ups evolved into dinners and long conversations that sometimes ran late. He stayed through the worst times without trying to fix everything, just offering steady support. When he kissed me by the lake near my new apartment, it felt like entering a space untouched by betrayal, a relationship founded on honesty. I used a portion of my recovered funds to start a small mentorship program for aspiring designers from disadvantaged backgrounds, funding software training and professional development. The effort was small but meaningful. Helping others remove financial barriers to creative careers gave my work new purpose. As fall became winter, the betrayal remained part of my history, but no longer defined daily life. 1 year after that birthday, I was in a place I hadn't expected, more secure financially, emotionally stronger, and surrounded by clearer boundaries and more honest relationships. Healing wasn't linear. Anger still surfaced sometimes, but those moments were less frequent and more manageable because my life had become fuller. My parents and I began a cautious reconciliation process. We met monthly with clear boundaries. They showed remorse, attended therapy, and made structured restitution payments as part of the agreement Walter's team had put in place. I told my therapist I didn't feel forgiveness complete, not yet, but I experienced a kind of peace. The financial education Walter provided transformed how I handled money. I manage investments with greater confidence, balancing security with growth. The remaining trust funds, though far smaller than they should have been, were invested conservatively for long-term stability while allowing me to live comfortably now. Walter suffered another health scare that required a short hospitalization. Facing his mortality added perspective. Despite everything, he was still my grandfather, and the time together mattered. During his recovery, I spent hours at his bedside, learning about his past, his relationship with my grandmother, the business choices he'd made, and his regrets. Those conversations deepened my understanding of the family dynamics, that while not excusing my parents' actions, helped explain how things had unraveled. My design career grew. The side business expanded enough that I considered doing it full-time. I hired 2 junior designers and a business manager to handle administration. The mentorship program had 5 scholarship recipients receiving training and guidance. Watching them gain confidence became one of my greatest professional rewards. Thomas and I grew closer. He had his own apartment but spent many nights at mine. Our lives blended naturally. "You know what amazes me?" he said once while we cooked. "How you've turned something that could have made you bitter into growth." The apartment itself, filled with art and books that felt like me, was modest compared to the Gold Coast unit, but it was truly mine. Natalie and I cooperated on the mentorship program. She joined the board and contributed funds and connections. On the anniversary of the revelation, I hosted a small gathering. Walter was there, a bit frailer but lucid. Natalie, Thomas, Jennifer, and a few close friends attended. My parents were not. They recognized this milestone wasn't for them. Around my dining table, I looked at the people who had become my chosen family and felt overwhelming gratitude. "A year ago, I thought my life was destroyed," I said in a toast. "What I've learned is that when the foundation is revealed to be false, you have the chance to build something true." Walter raised his glass. "To truth." The others echoed him. Later, with dishes in the sink and Thomas nearby, I thought about the lessons of the year. Financial wealth offers security, but trust and authenticity are harder to rebuild and more valuable. Forgiveness is a process, not forgetting or excusing, but a gradual lightening of anger. Most importantly, while we can't choose what happens to us, We do control how we respond and what we build from both gifts and wreckage. The betrayal would remain a chapter in my story, but not the one that defined me. It forced me to take control of my narrative and to write the rest with intention and authenticity.